Secondly is individual responsibility. Each person in a family has a responsibility. So, for example, in our family, my 6-year-old son has a responsibility of when the dishwasher is done, his job is to take the clean spoons and forks and put them where they're supposed to be. Every person has a responsibility. The younger you are, the less your responsibilities, but the older you get, you pick up more and more responsibilities. Why should everyone have responsibilities in the family? Well, it's because some people can't do everything. It is better for everyone to do a little bit than for some people to do everything. It is also because some people in the family do certain tasks better than some others. So it's easier for the right people to do the right task. It is also important for ownership. And the same is true in the church. Every person in the church should be given a responsibility. We need to make it a culture in our churches that everybody has a responsibility. Why? Because there'll be more ownership. There'll be more desire for outcomes. There'll be more desire for growth. There'll be desire for improvement. And then there is also more efficiency because more people are now free to do the things that they want to do or they're qualified to do, as we shall see in a minute. Also, it is very hard to be critical and judgmental when you are part of the team, when you have a responsibility and you are working. It is much easier to find fault in a church when you have no part of it. Many issues result from people staying as spectators. In this soccer stadium, there are no spectators. Everyone in the church should get in and should be playing the game. One of the biggest causes for inefficiency in a church is the option we give to people to be spectators in the church. Let me ask you a question. Are you part of a church and have not taken up any responsibility? Why? If you do responsibilities in your home, why not do responsibilities at church? If you are a leader in a church, are you giving enough responsibilities to every person in the church? There are two kinds of responsibilities, and I talked about this about 10 years ago in a sermon on evangelism. I think there are two kinds of responsibilities. First is what I call a gift. We all know what a gift is. A gift is what you are gifted to do, and people who are gifted to do all kinds of ministries in the church. There are singers, there are musicians, there are instrumentalists, there are speakers, there are preachers, there are teachers, there are miracle workers, there are organizers. All kinds of gifts are used in the church. Then there is what I will call a role. A role is something that you are not gifted to do, but you still do it because a task is there. Back when I was in India, we had a small church growing up. My dad was a pastor. We had kind of a home church, and then we met at a building. But it was a very small church. And then there was a need for Sunday school, to teach Sunday school to the small kids. I was the only person available. So I taught Sunday school to these little kids for almost 10 years. I didn't like it very much. I don't think the kids liked it very much, but I did what I had to do. The good thing is I still maintain contacts with some of those kids, and it's good to see that they are still growing spiritually and they're staying in fellowship with God. That is a role. When you do something that you are not gifted to do, why should you take up a role? Well, you take up a role because there are some tasks that don't have the right gifted person yet. And so if nobody takes it up, the task won't be done. So you take the task until the gifted person comes along. Or you take up a role or a task because you haven't found a way to use your gift in the church. And so until you find some gifts that you can use in the church, take up some roles. Rather than being a spectator and saying, well, I'm not a forward, so I'm not going to play this game, pick up some role until you find something that you are gifted for. The other reason why we need to take up these tasks as roles is because then we can distribute all these tasks. If one person does all the tasks and he's not gifted for it, it is very draining. It is true that when you do something that you're gifted for, you are energized by it. But when you do something that is a role, you are not energized by it. It actually drains you. So if some people are doing all the roles, they will be drained by the end of the day, by the end of the week. So every member has a responsibility to pick up gifts and to pick up roles. In Acts chapter 6, verses 1 through 4, the context is that the young fledgling church at that time was growing rapidly, and they had some growing pains. And some widows of one culture in the church was not getting fed like the other widows in that church. And so this is the problem that they had, and they were addressing the problem. Let's read Acts chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. In those days, when the number of disciples was increasing, the Hellenistic Jews among them complained against the Hebraic Jews because their widows were being overlooked in the daily distribution of food. So the 12 gathered all the disciples together and said, "It would not be right for us to neglect the ministry of the word of God in order to wait on tables. Brothers and sisters, choose 7 men from among you who are known to be full of the Spirit and wisdom. We will turn this responsibility over to them and will give our attention to prayer and the ministry of the word." You see what they were doing? They were redistributing some of the roles so that gifts could be used. Nowhere here does it say that these 7 men should have a previous experience in the food and hospitality job. No, it doesn't say that. In fact, the only 2 things it says is that they need to be full of the Spirit and wisdom. So these 7 men took on these roles while the others were doing their gifts. Because if the other people also took on all these roles, nobody would be able to do their gifts. And this is in Acts chapter 6. In chapter 8, we find that one of these 7 men had multiple gifts. Philip had the gift of preaching and teaching and evangelism and miracles. In fact, he was responsible directly for the gospel going to Africa for the first time in Acts chapter 8. So he had multiple gifts, but he took on the role as a server to serve the widows. It may be that you may have multiple gifts, but you don't know it yet. And so you pick up different roles as you are figuring out what your gifts are. What if you made a comprehensive list? If you're a church leader or an institution leader, what if you made a comprehensive list of every single task there is in the church? If it's a small church, if it's a bigger church, give responsibilities to the missionary or the ministry team leaders to make a list of every task in their field and give it to the church members and see how many people can pick up gifts and roles so that all the tasks can be distributed throughout the church. And that will free each person to also do what they are gifted for.